Hi again, everybody. Welcome into episode number 4 of When the Game Ends. My name is Ben Holden. Bottom of the screen is Mike Carman, and upper left is Colby Cohen. Thrilled to have Colby with us today. And this is one of those moments, guys, for me, where the three of us were together, I don't know, for part of a year back 2010, 2011. And here we are. We're all in the media. I've been in the media. Colby's been in the media. Carmy's dabbling in the media doing this podcast. Isn't life crazy, Colby, how these things kind of work out?
Well, this one's more fun than normal because of the connections, and
Yeah.
Carmi and I, from playing and not just playing at youth level almost, well, not youth, but we were young kids, 16 years old, whatever. And then
Yeah.
seeing each other again as pros. And then obviously that's where we got to know you. And then you and I have stayed in touch. We've worked on, ESPN tournament packages together. So yeah, it's more fun when you get to like reconnect with people that played a role in your journey,
Yep.
because there's a lot of shows out there, but you rarely have this level of, connection in the shows. So yeah, I think this is a more unique for sure.
This thing,
Let's
Carmi,
definitely.
before I know you want to go here, but this thing could be 2 hours, but I don't think we'll go that long, but we probably could.
Do
But
I talk a lot, guys?
we
Me?
all do. Carmi?
Because the problem is going to be listening to what everyone else says during this one. No, you talk about having the connection, and I mean, that's what we're trying to create with this, Colby, is to have something where it's not just the standard, hey, let's get a guy on and talk about his playing career. Let's find something that people can relate to and can relate to across any level of sport where you've played at a professional level or a high level. And as we talked about, when the game ends and what that looks like, because it's different for everybody and how you all processed it, right? So we can lead with that. When did you know, or did you know when the game was ending?
I'd say by the time I was in my third year of my deal in the American League, I would say maybe fourth. As you guys both know, like years start to blend together a little bit. So you get into that first contract, you get a qualifier, and you do one extra year, but it all kind of feels like the same because your salary doesn't actually really change other than a couple of percent. So, I pretty quickly realized that like once you're not a prospect and you become a suspect, you're in trouble. And when I started watching Torrey Krug and Kevin Miller and all these guys jump me on the depth chart in Providence, like I knew, like, okay, like you have a small window, in my opinion. Like 95% of the players have small window to make it. And if it doesn't happen and you become a depth player, that doesn't mean you won't get called up. You'll get one or two preseason games just because of like almost like, okay, like you may be a guy eventually. But for the most part, like then the next young group of players comes in and the next first and second round pick comes in. And so I realized it pretty quickly by the third year when like I couldn't produce offense like I needed to be useful to an NHL team. I was like, okay, let's go see what Europe is like. Can make some good money over there and sign a really fair and reasonable contract to go over play in Finland. Spent a couple of months there realizing if this is what hockey is for me, I'm good. Like I'll just go and start whatever is next. So that's where I came, when I came back and I started actually doing broadcasting while I was still playing, because I had an injury. I had groin surgery and I had a rehab, right? So I was in Boston, which is where I lived at the time. I was rehabbing with Mike Boyle, somebody that I spent so much of my hockey career with. And I started working at New England Sports Network and I started thinking like, okay, like this is probably what's next for me if I can, find my way here. And I think that's so long answer to a short question, but pretty quickly, Carmi, like seriously, like by the end of year 3, 4 in the American League, like I was like, okay, you can keep playing, and I'm sure somebody will give you something, but it wasn't. I wasn't built to play in the jungle my whole career. I'm not tough enough for that. Mentally, physically, I'm not built for
You,
that, guys.
it's funny. The thing that resonated that you brought up there is, you go from prospect to suspect. And I don't know if I've heard that, it's been a while and it's something I forgot along the way. But, you and I got traded not far apart from each other. It was within a couple months when we were in Lake Erie and you went out to Boston system and I went out to the Capital system. So I was down in Hershey. And that year didn't really feel that way. That year I was very much like felt like I was giving kind of a fresh turn of the page. Had one of the more productive parts of my career, and I was and that was leading into my qualifying offer, like you're talking about, right? That third year. So I get qualified again, nothing changes much from a dollars and cents standpoint, but I'm like, okay, fresh organization, finish strong, whatever. But then the next year was the lockout. And the lockout year was when I felt exactly what you were talking about, where the prospects are all getting pushed down that maybe would have played up. Any of the new prospects coming in are immediately going to get playing time because they want to see them. The NHL coach is down with the AHL team, and all he cares about are the prospects that are there. Yeah. So that just resonated with me, and I wanted to say, yeah, I know the feeling when that part comes.
Look, and both you guys are similar in this sense. I mean, there's a lot of connection as we'll get into. Carmen, you played 5 years. Colby, you played 6 seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most guys, and we saw it when the three of us were together. I mean, look at another good BU guy. I mean, it was like the BU mafia there in Lake Erie, man. We had our coach was BU. We had like 9 BU guys.
Yeah.
A guy like David Vandergulik. I mean, he played for 10 or 12 years. And most guys, it's really interesting to hear you talk about that, Colby, and because most guys will kick it and play in the jungle for a decade or 12 years and just keep chasing it, man. So I'm curious, and I have a quote that I wanted to read because you referenced that game. I was doing a little research earlier. February 1, 2014 was your first game on NESN, and it was UNH and Notre Dame, and you said you were quoted as saying I was god-awful.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get back to that in a minute. But so where did you get the idea? When did it first come into your head? Or who was the inspiration maybe, or said something to you, hey, try television, try broadcast?
So it's funny. Another connection here is at the time I was on my, playing in the Bruins system, had my call-ups, but just never got in. And there was a sideline reporter at NESN that I was like pursuing. Like personally pursuing, and Jamie Erdahl, a Minnesota girl.
Who I think with Jamie.
You guys would know, right?
Yeah, I worked with her.
You did football with her, Carmi. You probably know her from the local scene out in Minnesota. She's very good friends with Lauren Van Riemsdyk, and so anyways, and so she was the one who kind of was like, once things got, I don't think serious is the right word, because when you're 21, I don't think anything's, or 23, nothing's really that serious. But she was the one who I was with her at a 5K. And this is how it truly went down. And there was a guy
at You weren't running a 5K.
I was not running. I was watching.
He was there, he said.
Yes, I was watching the 5K. I donated. But there was a producer from NESN who was at the 5K, because I think NESN was like sponsoring it. So like I went with her just to like be supportive, right? And so he was a guy who had done a lot of like interviews as a producer, as sort of like a coordinating executive type of producer at NESN. And we're talking at this 5K, and he knew me as when I played at BU, Bean Pots, I did a lot of interviews. I got to do bench interviews, all that type of stuff. And he said to me like, well, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm here just rehabbing, and, hopefully I'll be back playing next year. And he's like, well, why don't you come drop by our studio and like, let's get you on a college hockey studio game or whatever. And I was like, all right. Like, and honestly, I came in the next weekend. I did the game with Jamison Coyle and Don Toot Cahoon. And like, that was kind of where it started. And I, NESN was really, really good to me. They worked with me. They pointed things out to me. They gave me 5 or 6 games in the studio the next 5 or 6 weekends. And then a spot opens up, someone gets sick, and they're like, you want to go call a game with Tom Caron, a guy who is a legend in Boston. You know Tom well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Carmi, you probably wouldn't know the name because he's a very local, does Red Sox, does the Bean Pot, but he's well known in Boston for the Red Sox, right? And come here, buddy. And he's a great guy. And so I got both my dogs down here, and they do not get along very well. So that's where it all started. And yeah, my first game I ever did, like in the booth, It was so bad. It was like a car crash. Like you would want to watch it because you wanted to see what bad, stupid thing I did next on TV. And you know, like that's really how it all started. And it didn't get much better as far as in-game broadcasting goes. I did my first NCAA tournament that year, having only done one game. And it was bad. Like it was bad to the point where after the first year I did the NCAA tournament, the NCAA went to ESPN and said, we do not want him back on our air.
Wow, I didn't know
for
that.
this tournament.
Wow.
And luckily,
wow,
my boss, John Vassallo,
I was going to bring him up.
he said, you know what? No, we're going to work with this guy because I think there's something there.
Yeah.
And thank God for JV. He has been the angel in my corner since I started. And to this day, we talk all the time about everything. And, you know, he kept me in it and worked with me and pointed and was really critical. Like, it wasn't like, you're okay, you're doing well. He was like, okay, like, we've had meals together. You should be better at this. Here's what we need to work on. So, so that's kind of how it started and almost ended really quickly.
Wow.
Were you deterred at all by that first game, or
Very.
did you just kind of dig right back in and you're like, yeah, I'll figure this out eventually?
I wasn't deterred by the first game. I was like, okay, like you'll get better and like you'll learn. What was deterring was my first NCAA tournament because at that tournament I had a North Dakota Michigan game, right? Two very passionate fan bases on social media, very passionate.
That's putting it mildly.
I was very, very insecure about my work, like very insecure because you've done one thing your whole life, play hockey. You know you're good. You know you're better than 99% of the entire world at hockey. But at broadcasting, you've done it once, twice, and you have to do it in front of, you know, an NCAA tournament, a Michigan North Dakota game. They probably had 500,000 people watching that game. Yeah. Right? The whole state of North Dakota is watching. So that was hard. That was a really difficult one for me, Carmy. And I did think after that, maybe this isn't for me. I did definitely have those thoughts.
Yeah. I could see that. I mean, especially those, like you said, those fan bases are tough. But, you know, you also just brought up something talking about, you know, doing something your whole life. I mean, that ties right into a theme that we've talked about here. And I think, you know, even the first episode we did where Ben and I talked, we essentially interviewed me. And that's the hardest part about, I think it doesn't matter what you go into, whether it's broadcasting, whether it's real estate, sales, whatever it is, you're starting something completely fresh and new and you have no experience in it. Most of us don't. And having that confidence, or not even necessarily building the confidence, or having somebody like the guy you mentioned, John
Vassallo.
Having somebody to, you know, work with you and have confidence in you. You know, Ben, that's kind of what happened with PL too. He had a guy who kind of took him under his wing in the brokerage business to teach him that side. So it's really fun to hear that, you know, the mentor side and how important that is to that transition for us.
And I'll give you another name of a guy who's been instrumental and has been in my corner and doesn't need to be, because I've actually disrupted some of his work, not on purpose, but just because it happens, is Dave Starman. Dave Starman has been, you know, as big a cheerleader for me in my broadcasting career as anybody that I know, right? As far as color analysts go, analyst wise. And like, Dave would have loved to have become the guy on the Frozen Four, probably should have become the guy on the Frozen Four if we're being honest with each other, but we don't make those decisions. We're workers, right? And he's always supported me and had my back. And that's another guy who I've turned to who's helped me a lot in broadcasting is Dave Starman. I'd put Billy Jaffe in that, you know, and you know, obviously Butchie's not a color guy, but you know, he's also been in my corner from day one. We were friends before I got into broadcasting. He pushed me to keep going. Don't quit. He said the same thing to me after my first tournament. Yeah, it wasn't very good, but I could see something there. And you know, you need people like that to kind of bring you along. And you know, Ben could tell you this, Carmy, like the broadcasting industry, the egos are worse than $12 to $15 million a year NHL players. Because there's only one spot, basically two spots on each team. There's not a lot of spots, right? And so People are really protective. They're catty. It's not like a team, like, let's do this together situation in a lot of places, which I dealt with in Chicago on a big level when I worked there. And so having those types of people, JV, Star, Jaffe, Butchie, people like that, you really do need those people in the broadcasting industry.
Yeah, you're spot on, man. You've been doing it long enough, man. It's you're 100% accurate. It's I equate it to what I watched you guys the couple years I was with you, in the regard of, like, there's nothing guaranteed, man. It doesn't matter if you've been up and you come back down. Like you talked about, Colby, you got 3 games. I mean, you didn't get another shot to go up. Carmen, you never got a shot to go up. I'm not trying to be the bearer of bad news. Just state
reality.
It's reality. It's a fact. It's
reality.
It's very tough, and it's very difficult. Colby, I want to shift a little bit. I want to ask you about your coach, Jack Parker.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Dave, and Dave and I knew something was up. We did a game at Matthews. You were gone, and Jack literally raced across the parking lot as quick as he could for his age at the time. And it was about a month before he retired. And I didn't deal with him as much as I would have liked to. I was fortunate to deal a lot with Red Berenson, Ron Mason, coaches like that. What was the influence that Jack left on you? What are the biggest things that he left on you? And did you ever have conversations about after hockey, or was it all about hockey? What was the relationship like there?
So, to this day, Coach Parker and I are still really close. I mean, not every guy keeps in touch with him. I still am, like, we still have regular touch points. I talk to, obviously his daughters are married, and, like, his one daughter, Jacqueline's son, is the captain at BU right now. Shane LaChance. He was in our locker room as a 4 and 5 and 6-year-old while I was there. Right. So I've always been close with the whole Parker family. Jackie Parker, his wife. Yeah, there's a Jack, a Jackie, and a Jacqueline.
All Jack.
And an Allie. I always say to Allie, I'm like, what happened? Like they fell asleep at the wheel with you, Al. But I'm still really close with them. Now Coach and I, we just, like, really talk about, like, he'll ask me, how's Colin doing? How's Shaddy doing? He'll ask me how my family is. Like, I'll update him on how guys are doing. We'll talk about Shane. He knows that because I'm still in the game, I follow BU, and honestly, like, last year, I didn't really miss, like, with ESPN Plus, I don't miss any games. I have a daughter who goes to bed at 7:00. So it's easy to be in on Friday and Saturday nights. We talk quite a bit. It's really funny that you're asking me this question, because here's what I'm finding. Now that I'm involved in coaching, and that's kind of something that I'm now involved in at the youth all the way up to the junior level here with the New Jersey Titans, I find Jack coming out of me in the coaching, and not the X's and O's, but one thing Jack was so good at, and I was a whipping boy who, like, I was a guy who he knew he could make an example out of in front of the whole team. Not every guy's like that, right? And so what Jack was great about was, like, he knew when, like, he needed to come sit with you and put his arm around you or take you out to dinner, and, like, okay, we're both humans. Like he understood how to treat people in hockey, right? It didn't mean he didn't yell and scream at you. It didn't mean he didn't, call you out in video in front of the whole team. Like I said, especially me. And my last year at BU, the year I had the most personal success, as an All-American, leading the team in goals, like I had my statistically best career. That was the year he was the hardest on me in front of everybody else. But he always, always, always brought me into the room. He would tell me, hey, look, I have to do that because it's got to be somebody that matters on a big level, or the rest of the guys don't get it. We had a lot of young players, and he was just so good at being a human being towards me and all the guys. And maybe not, I bet if you had Shaddy on here, he'll tell you something totally different, because his experience with Jack was very different, not as good as my experience was, which is shocking. A coach that I had a better experience than with him. I mean, that's shocking. But I find the Jack Parker stuff coming more out of me now, and how I'm not even how I'm coaching on the ice, right? More how I'm dealing with the players and dealing with the personalities. He was as good of a personality manager as I've ever been around. He knew every guy was treated differently, and he knew how to treat each guy to get the best out of them. And that's what I take the most from him. And other than that, every time Shane, his grandson is a sophomore at BU, and he's the captain, and he's not the captain because of his last name being LaChance. His father was Scott LaChance, who was an NHLer.
Yeah, Olympian.
He was a unanimous decision to be captain as a sophomore. This kid was a captain in the USHL for a team that won. He is a very, very impressive kid. Unanimously picked to be captain this year as a sophomore. Unanimously. Was a leader as a freshman on that team. He really was. So, we talk about Shane. I text him every time Shane does something good, and I'm like, I know you didn't teach him that. This kid's got way too much skill because you had no skill as a player, Jack. So I love any opportunity to talk about Coach Parker. I'm such a big fan of him and his family. I never had a coach that I felt like cared about me more than him probably in my entire career. And wow. I think Quinny and Bavo, who are the other coaches, I have that same bond with those guys.
Yeah.
But I think, Jack was the leader of kind of operating in that regard.
So two things, Colby. Number one, to sum up what you just said, it's not making it personal with guys, right? It's coaching them hard. Doesn't mean you're not on them, but you interact with them as a person. And like you said, you go put your arm around them. I mean, I find that, again, you're talking about before we hopped on the interview, the different levels of what you're working with now. And like I coach too, and I have kids that they're going to be, Bantam age this year. And I am hard on them. I am not shy about that. I lead with that beginning of the year, the open year meeting, but I make a promise to every kid and parent in the room. I go, it will never be personal. I will never personally come after you. It is all about hockey. And I go, you can ask anybody. I will come grab you and put my arm around you later and explain, in whatever calmer tones, whatever it is, but figure out a way to make that connection and still not make it personal. Where I wanted to go next, and you segued it perfectly, is your interaction with Quinny. So from the difference of having him as an assistant in college when we played for him in Lake Erie and what that was like.
Yeah. So like, again, it's hard for me to find somebody who had a bigger influence on a lot of really important years of my hockey career than David Quinn. And it's really not for me when I zoom out and I do reflect, because I try to tell the guys, don't make mistakes that I made, right? Like, here's how I screwed up, so don't do it. And it's easy to put a finger on the fact that when I got traded away from Quinny, because, I go up, I play a couple games in Colorado, I get sent down, I get injured the first game I get back, I hurt my wrist. Weirdly enough, they told me you'd be out for like 6 weeks. Well, weirdly enough, like a week later, they're like, oh no, you're good to practice. And then they traded me like the next day, which is why they cleared me. But Quinny was tough. Like, there's no one who's ever been harder on me and nitpicked me harder at everything that I've done than David Quinn. But I've played my best. I played all my best hockey for David Quinn, all of it. And it all started to slowly go downhill when I got traded and I didn't have him. And I'm not saying it's his fault. I should have been mature enough to, do all the things that he was telling me I needed to do. But I almost took my foot off the gas because I didn't have him watching every step I took. I mean, you guys used to make fun of us and call us his kids because we couldn't do a drill in practice in the American League where he didn't stop practice and tell Shaddy or I we were doing something wrong. And you guys would make fun of us. Like, it wasn't our fault. But honestly, like, I wish I would have had that for longer, because I think it would have set me up with pro hockey a little bit better to have a little bit more success, because I was talented enough. I was my own worst enemy, and I took my foot off the gas. And like, honestly, like, I think that if I would have had more time with him at the pro level in the American League, where somebody who was that hard on me, but I knew he cared about me. Like, even when I was like, Quinny's such an asshole. Like, I still knew he loved me. Like, he did. He loved me. Like, he had been working with me since I was 15 years old. Like, there was a serious bond and a serious connection that I knew at the end of the day, that guy had my back and had my best interest, even when I wanted to kill him. And there were plenty of those moments, and he wanted to kill me plenty too. I'm not a one-way street. So it was different, Carmi, for sure. But it gave you guys a lot of entertainment as our teamates, because you guys would be like, "Hey, did you check with Dad? Can you go ask your dad what time the bus is leaving? Can you go?" Like, you guys gave it to us pretty good about that stuff.
Well, Colby, that gives me a perfect time to give my vantage point. Obviously, I did everything with you guys except play, but I was always on the bench at practice. And you would come over, you're like, "Man, he's so hard on me, Benny." And I go, "He wants you to work harder. I don't know what else to tell you, man." Yeah. So that's a great perspective on both Jack and a guy that we both, or all three of us, knew really well and still are friends with today. Let's go back a little bit, talk about the transition. I mean, the sense I get from you, Colby, is you were really at peace with your transition. It wasn't like, you stumbled and went rock bottom. Maybe you did. If you did, you can share that. But it seems like you were really at peace with when you had to make that choice. I'm done playing. I'm going to do something else with my life. Am I right in that?
Yeah, I was, and I had just had to have that sports hernia surgery twice. I had it. It didn't work. I had it again. I didn't feel good. I had already had hip surgery. Like, I was kind of crumbling physically, and I just knew, like, I went and I played maybe 5 games in the East Coast League or something like that. I went and played in Reading, so I could be living at home, driving in every day. I didn't have to go move anywhere, whatever. And after like a couple of weeks, I sat down with the coach and we just had a really honest conversation. And he's like, "What do you want out of this?" And I said, I think I'm done. I said, I don't. I think I went and played in San Antonio a couple of games more in the American League, something like that. And, the timeline, but I just realized, like, you had a great run, and the longer you wait to do other things, the harder it's going to be to do other things. You've got this broadcasting thing that you're already dipping your toes into. Like, I had made a couple of bucks. I was fortunate to be a part of a great run with the Bruins. I lucked my way into a playoff, Stanley Cup bonus share. I had lots of call-ups over those years where I never played. Once you become a depth player that they don't mind healthy scratching, they'll take you on the 8-day road trip because they know they're never going to play you, all that stuff. And I was at peace with it, because I just said, "Look, you're not good enough. You don't skate fast enough to do what you need to do to be a useful player at this level." And so it really was like, it was not a hard decision for me to make, because I just realized, like, 2 things happen. You retire from the game, or the game retires you. Like, the game retired me. The game was done with me. You're not good enough to do this anymore. If you want to be in this game, you got to figure out a different way to be a part of this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point too. You also had the broadcasting thing, right? You had already kind of dipped your toe in that, where you had an idea of, like, "Hey, what am I going to go do now?" Like, or, "Hey, I'm going to go try this." I don't think, maybe you didn't realize it was going to turn into what it's turned into now, but you're like, "This at least gives me a transition out of the game." And I think that's really important. So we talked about that too, I think, with every episode so far, is just having some sort of a plan. It doesn't have to be what you're going to do forever, but, like, and I've referenced PL a couple of times, Benny, and Colby, we're talking about Pierre-Luc Letourneau-Leblanc. That, it's having, like, direction, having something to channel your energy towards makes all the difference in the world. If you don't have that, then you're kind of spinning in the wind if you're not prepared for it. And that's personally what happened to me. And it's kind of like, well, what do I do now? And so that's awesome that you had that opportunity. And again, how things fall in, right? You're chasing a girl, and next thing you know, you're in a broadcast studio.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's true. It really is. Like, that's the truth of it. And how I kind of got pushed into it. And I think that's one thing. It's like, I've always been lucky that, like, just the last couple of years, I'm working for the Blackhawks. I'm on the, I'm traveling with the team. It's like I'm doing everything but having to go out for pregame skate and for games. Like I'm in my normal spot in the press box in a suit. That's what I was as a player, a healthy scratch. So there was a lot. It was like you're right back into it, and it's really funny because I kept saying to my wife when we were in Chicago, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if being fully back into it in this regard, on the team plane, working for the team, here's your itinerary, pregame meal. Like, I was like, I kind of left this life because I was kind of over it. And I was like, I love being a freelancer where you work for ESPN or you work for CBS and you fly in and you see your buddies, you have a dinner, and then you go home to your family and your life is not consumed by the team. Yeah. And I, like, again, like, it was like almost weird. I was like at practice every day when I was in Chicago, because like, what else do you do when you're a full-time broadcaster? You go to practice every day. Right. And so it was really weird, Carmi, to be out of it for a little bit in that regard and then back into it. And doing that whole song and dance and going through all the cities and the best part of it was that you get to see so many friends. And I don't have to worry about having too much to drink the night before a game and playing guilty because I don't have to play.
At least you put in playing guilty into that. As if like we weren't going to stop with just having too much to drink. It was too much drink and having to play guilty. Well, it's funny you talk about like being back around that structured environment. And I never really thought about that perspective where you guys, and Ben, obviously you've experienced it too, that you are back on the team schedule again, where your whole day is planned out for you. Yeah. And that freelance aspect, having the freedom to go around and see places, see friends and new places and hang out and do your own thing is awesome. So that actually, I have one more question, is kind of talking about with the transition out. Did you struggle at all with seeing buddies still playing, or guys that you had played with were maybe not the buddies as much, but maybe some of the guys where you played against and you're like, how is this guy full-time in the NHL now? Did you ever have any of those thoughts at all?
You know what? Like, I really didn't. And that might sound like bullshit. Especially of my friends. I just became huge cheerleaders for them. And I realized that I could now support them publicly and get paid to do it. Like last year during the playoffs, I every morning on my show, I criticized the Boston Bruins for not having Shaddy on the first power play unit. Like, so, or when they scratched Reamer.
I heard you. Yeah, I heard a couple of those shows.
and when they're scratching Reamer, I'm like throwing a fit public, and so I just become their biggest fans. And honestly, for the guys who like maybe I didn't like or didn't have great relationships with, good for them. Like, for them to figure it out and find a way to keep playing. There's some guys that maybe we were at the U.S. national team with that ended up having these long KHL careers and made a ton of money. Guys I didn't really care for, but like at the end of the day, like I'm not a walk in the park either, right? So like some of those guys that I didn't really like I'm sure I'm part of the reason that the friendships and the relationships weren't great. So I never really had that, honestly, because I think that I'm just like thankful that I did get to play in the National Hockey League. I have my Stanley Cup ring, in its little box behind me. I got to lift the cup, even though, did I do anything? No. Like, what did I do? I worked out every day and told the boys good stories in the sauna from the night before when they weren't going out. And that was the rule. You had to kiss and tell if you were going to go out. You had to kiss and tell, right? So it's like, I wasn't angry. Like, a lot of guys are mad at the game. They're mad at the GMs. They're mad at the coaches. Like, I never harbored any of that stuff. Like, the coach, the biggest asshole I ever played for was Bruce Cassidy. And now, like, I enjoy seeing him. I do. And he treated me worse than anybody's ever treated me in the entire world, my entire life. Right. Wow. But I see the guy now, and I didn't appreciate his methods back then, but like, I like the guy's a hockey savant. I like picking his brain. I like learning about the game. There are terms I use on broadcast that I got from him. Like, you start to realize that it's not necessarily personal, even though when you're young, it might feel personal. And you realize everybody has a different tactic. Everybody was brought up a different way. I'm learning it now because I wouldn't say, Carmi, that we were brought up by old school hockey people. We were probably on the end of the old school. into the beginning of sort of new school, but where it's at now, I'm like, oh my God, they probably at times think I'm saying things like I would have thought someone who was an old school prick. So you just start to like get different perspective on those types of things. And like I said, I enjoy running into Bruce Cassidy now because I love to pick his brain, and we laugh about some of the stuff now, right? Because again, like you remember situations a certain way, but if you're really being honest about it, you got to realize what your part in all those situations were as to why those types of things would go down. So,
yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, I mean, you realize it's not personal. That is definitely something over time where you realize the methods. There's a method to the madness, right? And I wanted to point out too, you'd mentioned what an influence Jack Parker was on your career. And even though he would have been hard on you when he needed to be, things like that, that's for me, that guy is John Hines. I had Heinze at the program, World Juniors, and I got to come full circle and play my last year in the AHL with him, and we went on a run with Wilkes-Barre. And he hadn't changed much, same old Heinze, but I loved it. Like you're talking about that someone pushing you constantly and not accepting anything less than your best. And he turned me into the guy I was. This will be funny to you, Colby. I was a scoring winger before Heinze got a hold of me, and then I turned into a two-way center that eventually became more of a defensive-minded center, at the pro level. But Heinze did that for me. Otherwise, I would never have gotten to play where I did.
He cared about his guys, Heinze. Like, say what you want about Heinze, but he'd stand in front of a bus for his players, and it's why he's made it and why he continues to get coaching jobs, even with teams that haven't had the greatest records. He's had a couple of really good runs, but he's a leader of men, John Hines. He's another guy. I love seeing Heinze. I love, now we talk about BU and we're doing these alumni, things together, and we're all adults with kids. And so it's so different now, but it's a great example of a guy who, like, at the time, your team at the national team, you guys walked on your tippy toes every single day. We had Ron Ralston, a little more laid back. We were only scared to death when John Lilly freaked out or the boxing coach freaked out. We were not scared of Ronnie like you guys were scared of Heinze. Heinze was a scary guy back then.
Oh my, and again, I say all this with all due respect. Yeah, he scared the crap out of us. But it was, again, you said it perfectly. He was a molder of men, and we were young men, right? But he set forth habits and skills and just a thought process that I carried with me forever. I owe that guy so much. But it is, it's funny you bring that up because it was a crash course when you got there that first year with him, kind of learning to grow up pretty quickly.
Colby, I want to go back. Take us back to now that you're what, 35, 36, right?
Yep.
18-year-old Colby Cohen, what would you tell that young guy now, what you've gone through? What the question is, what's your advice for young players, and what do you tell them to maybe, if there's a message you can get out about, hey, do this, do that, prepare for this, because the hockey's going to be gone at some point?
I think the biggest thing is you got to trust the process and be patient. And I think that's probably one of the biggest areas that I screwed up, is that I was always in a rush. And whether it was leaving school a year early, although I don't regret that decision, it was the time for me to go.
Right.
Or when I got traded, and, one of the first questions I asked Don Sweeney was, well, like, when am I going up to Boston? It's just like, you've got to trust the process. And what I think I've come to realize is that, everybody at that level is a good hockey player, AHL, NHL. I said, but the really, really good ones, and the guys who have these long careers, Patrick Kane is a guy we both played with, Eric Johnson, whatever.
Still playing.
We go down the list of the guys that have survived 15, 20-year NHL careers, and it's because everybody says you got to get better every day, right? But I don't think I believed that at that age. Like, sure, I thought you'd come back first year to second year pro, you got better because it got a little bit easier and it got a little slower. College, first semester to second semester to sophomore year. But the guys who truly believe that you can get better every day and they work in practice to get better every day, And then obviously they stay healthy and there's other God-given gifts and things like that. But
Yeah.
I think I was in a rush. And I don't think I truly believed that you could get better every day. I don't think I believed that. I'm sure I said it, but I don't truly think I bought into that. And now, having gone through the career that I've gone through with broadcasting, and I've been closer to the NHL as a broadcaster for long periods of time, I truly see Patrick Kane at 36 years old trying to be a better hockey player today than he was yesterday. And I know I'm using an example of the best American-born hockey player of all time, but that's the difference in mentality and mindset. And Carmi, I'm not going to speak for you. Maybe you could tell me how, if you truly bought into that, or if it was just lip service for you. I mean, you were a hardworking guy. Like, you didn't take a rep off. That I do very much remember. But like, I did. Like, there were practices when I was a young pro or even at BU that, like, I just got through practice, right? Like, I'd get a sweat and I would just get through the day and I would make my outlet passes and I would play my one-on-ones and, like, I would have a fine practice. But, like, was I pushing myself? Was I getting better that day? No, I wasn't. I was relying on talent. And that's where I would tell an 18-year-old hockey player, like, if you can truly own that and believe in that, well, you might have a chance.
It's interesting. You bring that up and you kind of asked me that question, right? I've never thought about that from that perspective. I think, I don't know if I truly bought in that I could get better every day. Yeah, I think we all like said that 100% because that's what was expected of us, that we had that mindset. And I don't think I ever thought that I couldn't get better every day. But for whatever reason, and it happened at a young age, I mean, I always had tough coaches and I just always knew that I had to push myself. I was never like the most talented guy growing up. I had, like I said, the Eric Johnsons around me, the Kyle Posos, Peter Mueller, Jamie McBain. We had an incredible
was
AAA
good,
team.
man. He was skilled. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yep. And you talk about, and I just didn't have natural, I mean, I obviously had some natural ability, right? Let's not say things that aren't true, but, I felt like a lot of what I had to do, I had to work for, and I still had that in pro. Every single day I was at the rink, I felt like I was playing for my job. I never felt relaxed in that regard. I knew that there was always someone nipping at my heels, whether it was the guy a year younger than me that just came in, or like someone that came back from injury that maybe that I took their spot, whatever it was, right? So I always had that in the back of my head. And that's what you're talking about. That's where my practice habits came from, just because I knew I needed to do that, whether it was true or not. That's just what I believed. I never felt comfortable at any point. So
I have one more thing for Colby, and then we can wrap up, Carmi, unless you have anything else. I'm putting you on the spot here, man. 94 BU players have played in the National Hockey League. I'm not going to ask you the best. I'd love for you to give us your take on the 6 you would start from the net out BU guys through the course of their great storied history. Carmi, this may spark a debate, the whole East-West thing. We can do a Minnesota team too. But Colby, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, man.
Well, I think Jim Craig would probably be the guy in goal.
Yeah.
Although Jake Ottinger is no slouch in that position. Just ask his bank account on
That's
his
right.
new 8x8, $68 million deal.
Yep.
Whatever, I know it wasn't 8x8, 8 by and change. So my math, I do know how to do multiplication. So you probably start with one of those guys, and then I mean, look, Jack Eichel, Macklin Celebrini. I guess you start with the Hobie Bakers. Look, I'm biased towards Colin Wilson.
I knew you would say that, and I get it.
I think Colin Wilson is if Colin could have stayed healthy, I think he could have been a Hall of Fame type of player. I think Colin was dealing with other things throughout his career that hurt him, and I think that he had health issues starting with the national team, with our squatting to a box 5 days a week, which destroyed just about all of our hips. And I'm not throwing shade at them, by the way. Everybody was doing that. It's funny. I just ran into the national team guys in Minnesota, like Mono and all those guys, and we were laughing. It was good to see those guys. But and on D, probably Charlie McAvoy and Kevin Shattenkirk, and I think Matt Gilroy would probably have something to say about that, but we never got along all that well. So, I'm going to give the nod to my best man, Kevin Shattenkirk, and Charlie McAvoy, who I just, I think the world of. I love watching him play. And I know I did that a very my forwards and my D were very recent. I didn't dig in, and they're obviously Chris Drury. I didn't Jay Pandolfo. Like, I left a lot of really good players out.
Drury would be the one guy I would put as a forward on that.
Yeah.
Team.
I mean, but you maybe you put Drury with Eichel and Celebrini and you've got your 3 Hobey Baker winners up front. But look, it's an storied, program. It's actually a lot of fun to be an alum now. And like, it's really over the last couple of years, Carmi and I's friendship has actually kind of redeveloped, I would say, because we talk about BU and we talk about Minnesota and we trade things back and forth and we want those teams to play because we want those big name schools going head to head. Obviously Peltsy's always in our group chat. The 3 of us have our group chat. You remember Derek Peltier, obviously.
Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah.
I mean, we have such a funny group chat, the 3 of us still. And the funny, like, I barely knew Peltsy. Like, we wouldn't spend that much time together, but we just had this kind of funny little relationship when I was in Cleveland with them and rooming with them and stuff like that. So I as you guys can see behind me, I've got some BU stuff behind me. I'm obviously heavily involved with broadcasting, so I do enjoy that and with BU stuff. And then being kind of actually doing NIL and being a part of a collective of alumni that is actually doing and handling all the NIL at BU. And I was one of the founders of that group. So I have a lot of pride in BU and a lot of people that are really important in my life. We talked about some of them. But I'll tell you this, like, when I was at BU, we didn't actually play Minnesota those 3 years. We didn't see you guys. But like, we did see Michigan, North Dakota, Wisconsin. Like, there was no, I mean, obviously BC, they get their own special place of God, I want to beat you. But it was so much fun to play against those big name colleges in college. Like, some of my most memorable moments are playing at Michigan, playing at North Dakota, playing against Wisconsin, because it was a lot of the guys that we all played with at the national team. And you want to beat your friends more than you want to beat anybody. Like, that's where you play the hardest. So, that would be the lineup. I would not, if you had Jack Parker on here, he would tell you that I would put myself in that starting 5, but only to be a dick, because I certainly wouldn't put myself up there with the greats. Although, hey, look, I was a first team All-American at BU. It's not, it's the only thing I've ever had over Shaddy since we've been about 8 years old, is the first team All-American, and he was the second team All-American. So, he might have 80 million in the bank, but up there, you can see I got my All-American thing. So that's the one thing I got over him.
That. Don't ever let him forget
that.
That's
right.
Well, I was going to say the Mount Rushmore generations thing, it's a tough one. I think it's the same thing we did with the Red Wings, right? Like, you almost need one for different decades or, different eras. So I think Colby did pretty well with that one. I'll give him that. I don't have much else for you, Colby. Like, I did want to comment on your thing about, how we've kind of reinvigorated a friendship, so to speak. It's hard to keep in touch with everybody, and it has been really enjoyable to be able to have these conversations. And I was telling Ben before this that it's funny because you'll be on TV and I'll text you, and the second it goes to intermission break, when you're not doing color up there, firing a message back to me 5 minutes later, and I'm like, he's on it. I expect you to respond after the game. The problem is now that I know you're going to respond, so I'm going to be texting you.
Yeah. Well,
especially
listen,
if I don't like your East Coast bias.
It's fun. It's fun to hear from guys. Like, the amount of people, like, obviously now it's been a couple of years where we've been talking pretty frequently, but it's really fun when, like, you get a text from a guy that you haven't talked to or seen in forever, and they're like, "Hey, is this still your number?" And I'm like, "Oh my God," like, it's that's amazing. That's actually one of the best parts of TV, is hearing from all these people that I otherwise probably would never hear from again, and getting their takes on things. And like, you guys always give me your takes on what's going on with Minnesota. And then I incorporate that into the broadcast. I mean, I've dropped all your guys' names before. I always find a way to work your guys' names into it. So I think that's part of the fun of getting to wear the headset. And, you know that, Benny.
Oh yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It really is, man. Well, again, like I kind of started this thing. I mean, you would have told me 12 years ago the three of us would be doing this. I would have never believed it, man. It's been a lot of fun to do this, Colby, and got to let you plug your show you do with Johnny on Daily Faceoff, and we'll put a bow on it, man.
Yeah, come Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. Sometimes we go till 10, sometimes it's 11, just depends on what's going on in the league. You can catch us on Daily Faceoff's YouTube. We stream everywhere, Twitter. You can download them as podcasts. In the playoffs, we go to 5 days a week. Pat Maroon does our show 1 day a week. We kind of got this idea how like Aaron Rodgers and Bill Belichick do a spot on Pat McAfee. And we were like, hey, let's get somebody who isn't afraid to say things because so many NHL players are. Pat Maroon agreed to do it every week. So we've got him on every week, which is awesome. And we're not a game recap show. We talk more storylines and controversies, and, we kind of can go anywhere and everywhere with it. So definitely, check us out in the mornings. We get a lot of players. We have GMs come on the show. We've had the Flyers GM, the Blackhawks GM. We mix it up. So, we're having a lot of fun with it. It's fun to do a live show every morning where we're not worried about getting a commercial, as you know, Benny, with TV. Yep. You're just worried about getting your breaks, and we don't have to worry about that. We love our advertisers. They're really gracious the way they let us work them into the show where we don't have to go to breaks. And I appreciate you letting me plug the show.
Absolutely, man. Good to see you again, Colby.
Yeah, good to hang, guys.
Thanks, Colby. See you, bud.
All right, that'll do it. Episode number 4, Carmi. We're rolling. We gotta keep upgrading this thing. We will. For Mike Carman, Colby Cohen, Ben Holden saying thanks for watching episode 4 of When the Game Ends.